All right. Welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. And of course, that's hashtag BTH Pod if you're following on social media. It is my pleasure to continue talking to guys that have been playing on Saturdays, but will be playing on Sundays next season. And this week, it is my pleasure to bring you Mr. Cole Strange, a man that you're going to be seeing in the Senior Bowl. Cole, how's it going today, man?
It's going well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time, man. I know we chatted a little bit before we jumped on here, but it is mid-January. How are you doing this time of year? You know, it's been a few weeks since the last time you played, but you got the Senior Bowl, you got the Combine, a couple things ahead of you. How are you just dealing with this particular part of your life?
Well, it's definitely an exciting time. I guess for the most part, we're doing training, working out twice a day, working a little bit with a position coach, for specifics about football, not just in the weight room or training for combine stuff. It is a lot to think of. It's a lot to take in, but I think just taking it one day at a time, and preparing my mind for each thing as it happens, each day go and work out. And then as a senior bowl comes, prepare for that. And then once it comes and goes, do the same thing with the combine.
Now, for anyone that doesn't know, you're coming from UTC, it's Tennessee Chattanooga, and left guard basically your entire collegiate career. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's right. I started playing left guard about halfway through my freshman year. And then I kind of just stuck there. It was kind of one of those things where I had actually been practicing at tackle, funny enough. And then, our offensive line was like missing a couple spots and left guard wasn't very, dependable. And they were like, all right, let's toss him in there, see what happens. And so like halfway through, I think it was like on a Wednesday practice, our coach was like, you want to play left guard? I was like, yes. Kind of just stuck. So I played there for the whole career. At the end of 2019, I played 2 games at center just because we had some injuries. And then this past year, 2021, the fall season for us, we had injuries again, and I ended the year playing left tackle.
All right, a little versatility, get a couple positions under your belt. But how hard is it for you? Because when I think of any positional group, for me, offensive lineman is the one that's most like interdependent upon one another for the unit to do well. So when you're going to be sort of, I guess, just training for yourself, but also this team exhibition, the Senior Bowl. How hard is it when you can't really build any cohesion with guys that you'd actually be playing with?
Yeah, no, that is a good question. And I guess I'm kind of also learning as I go because, in college, I 100% felt like as me and, the other guys on the offensive line became closer and became better friends outside of football, and we practiced together every day also. But as like the chemistry grew stronger, I felt like we played better. You know what I mean? So
Totally.
I'm not really sure. I guess it's one of those things where it'll just have to happen fast. You know what I mean? Like we'll just have to become good buds in a couple of days, or at least just enough to where we can depend on each other, knowing, we've got this guy, or, you got this assignment. I can depend on, I guess it's just going to have to be a trust on the go,
Yeah, this is where you become a professional, right? Where it's just sort of plug and play.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's but right. I can tell you, having talked to 200 guys, it doesn't matter what era they played in, what positional group. Everyone says the same thing. The more they hung out with each other outside of practices, the stronger the team, the positional group became. It rings true. It doesn't matter.
It is.
Now, you were a really good defensive player in high school. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm as good as they come, I guess. I'd like to say that.
Yeah. So tell me how ultimately do you end? I mean, I guess left guard specifically there is a need, but why offensive line as opposed to defense?
I'm not really sure. Whenever I was getting recruited to UTC, they kind of told me I could play tight end, I could stay at defensive end, I could play offensive line, like wherever I wanted to go. And then when I got there, they put me in knee braces and gave me 69, and it was just kind of how it was. I don't have any problems with it. For a while there, it was kind of one of those things where I was a little bit like, not aggravated, but I just thought to myself, like, everything was new. The technique at offensive line, especially like pass blocking, is very specific, and I pretty much lost all the time whenever I first started. Like, I hated it. Not the position, just losing. Yeah. But it was kind of one of those things where I just kind of grew into it and embraced it. But yeah, I played defensive end in high school. Technically, I played linebacker in high school, and then my senior year of high school, I switched to defensive line. And then, I played tight end too. I'm mostly like a blocking tight end, but yeah, I guess wherever they want to play me, ultimately, like I'm rolling with it.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you embraced it with an open mind, but did you ever sort of, well, two things. Did you ever play that like what if game? Like, not that you didn't, I mean, obviously you did very well at offensive line to get to where you are, but were there times through that freshman year, because you did redshirt your first year there. So like, I mean, really those first couple of years, did you ever have real questions about, was it the right move? And then also, once you really embraced it, which maybe that was your mindset from the jump, how much did you realize, hey, playing defensive end, you kind of understood how to like get underneath someone because you understood some of the tools of the trade of the other side?
Yeah. So I definitely did play the what if game. It was never to the point of like me regretting, coming where I went, or like thinking to myself, like, I don't want to play anymore, because, it wasn't anything like that. It was kind of one of those situations where I was aggravated because I didn't feel like I was progressing well enough at offensive line. And I thought to myself, I did well at defensive end, and with good coaching, I feel like I could do well there, because offensive line just felt unnatural to me at first. So I did, but I definitely embraced it. And I would say that was after a year or so, of actually playing at the position. And then what was your other question now?
Just knowing how a defensive end operates, defensive lineman in general, how much did it feel you kind of had a little bit of an edge learning that position, understanding how a defensive lineman might move or think?
As much as I'd love to say that it was a big bonus, I don't know if it was. In our system back in high school, we ran like a stack, just a 3-3, and I played the strong side defensive end just to the field. And every play, pretty much, I would either pinch and go into the B gap, or I'd loop and go into the C gap. Like I didn't have it was kind of a system where we were to take up blocks and then let the linebackers make the plays. So I think that maybe like playing the position and preparing, like, got me physically ready. It got me physically like able to move and maybe pull and bend well. But as far as the techniques, I don't know if I had any technique in anything maybe until the last year or so.
Fair enough. I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I love to ask is, where along the way do you like truly gain the belief that you might actually make it to getting to a Senior Bowl and getting to the NFL draft combine? Because every little kid has the dream, but where along the road does that dream convert to like an actual belief that like, I can do this? Did you always have it, or did you have like a moment where like it sort of like really kicked in for you? Like, hey, I actually might make this work.
I think that the belief was always there. I never had any illusions about, being the number one pick overall coming from UTC, but it's never really been about that, in my opinion. Obviously if I'm able to get drafted high, I would love that, but getting into the league and getting on a team and then playing and competing is more important than, in my opinion, getting drafted higher, but I guess I've always had the belief that it will happen, and it's kind of funny because looking back at my freshman year, like I could really look at, if I could pull up some practice tape, I don't even know if we still have it. Like anyone could look and be like, nope, it ain't going to happen. But in my own head, even if I was, I was undersized and didn't get the technique, I was losing like rep after rep and like one-on-ones, like for some reason, I just still believed like, it's going to work. Maybe it sounds ridiculous, but as corny as it may sound, for the longest time, is pretty much as long as I can remember, like every day going down to practice, like I felt like I could come away learning something, you know what I mean? Or like not losing the same way twice. So the belief was always there. I think maybe a realization that anyone else believed it, maybe just outside of like my family and close friends, was like after the Kentucky game this year, there was two scouts that came to a practice during camp, and they told me about the Kentucky defensive line. They said they're really good, and told me about a couple of guys they had, and they said that it'll be important for me to compete against them because they'll probably play on Sundays. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, so like from that second, like I started preparing my mind, like, okay, this is like not everything, but I just started preparing myself to like that was going to be a war. And I felt like like we were playing against the SEC team, like a Kentucky team that was a good team this year too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I just felt like I belonged. You know what I mean? And then after that, Jim Nagy posted up some tweet or something about me, and then I got a couple calls from people talking about like how my name had jumped on some boards, and then I got calls from agents. So at that point, it was about a week or so after the Kentucky game, like it was the realization that like it's looking more realistic than it just being in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes total sense, for like the world to almost reflect what you've always seen. Like it took it years, but finally you got something from the outside world to validate how you've always felt.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. That's so cool, man. I'm so glad to hear that. Now, I wanted to bring up something, just, doing a little bit of research. You've always been an honor roll guy. So how important has it been for you to balance that academic side with this, physical football side? Because clearly you've managed it very well year in and year out.
Yes, sir. It's funny because I think for the longest time when I was younger, it was more so like I did good in school, so I didn't get in trouble with my dad at home. And then as I got older, it kind of became like a personal pride thing to do well. And as I've gotten older, it's kind of one of those things where I just kind of enjoy learning, so it's not so much there now. Don't get me wrong. There's been a couple of classes that were pretty rough and I didn't necessarily enjoy, but for the most part, you know, like it's not really about like getting the good enough grades to stay on the team. Like, I actually enjoyed the classes and, maybe corny again, but I guess I just kind of like learning.
Hey, that's great. I mean, doesn't it make life so much more interesting when you have this thirst for more?
Yes, sir. Exactly.
No, we kind of talked about this a little before jumping on, but you're not the kind of guy at all that paid attention to like all conference nominations or all America mentions, any of this type of stuff. Yeah. Have you let any sort of outside noise get to you at all in terms of maybe not necessarily you feeling validated like you belong, but just whether it's a high or a low, do you ever let any sort of outside media sort of get into your news feed?
Um, I think I do, but I don't want like it's definitely not in the way that if I got a selection for an all conference something, then it's like okay, like I'm good now. It doesn't come across that way. If anything, I normally like if it's preseason anything, I don't pay a lick of attention to it. If it's postseason and I don't get something that I want, I kind of look at it as like, you know, like I guess I kind of just let it piss me off. You know what I mean? And if I get something that I do want, like it's not like I revel in that and I'm like, I finally reached, what I've always wanted. You know what I mean? Because like that's nothing close to what I've wanted, like it's a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But so was there anything that is currently motivating you? Anything that you think you should have got that maybe you didn't?
I think this past year, my senior year, as far as like accolades and stuff, um, I, you know, I guess I did as well as I could have. I don't know. I'm not really one to like blow my own horn or nothing, but there were times where I like, I would get second team all conference. I got second team all conference for what was it? I guess 2 years or 3 years in a row, or 2 years, I think. And like I felt like I was better than that. Like it wasn't important, in my opinion, for everyone to point at me and like tell me like you're great. It was just, like I just let that like fester in me and like okay, that's fine, you know. But this past year, I got first team all conference. I've got like a couple all American, selections, and then in my conference, I got the Jacobs Award, which is like for the best lineman. So as far as that stuff goes, I guess you could say like there's a little bit higher satisfaction, but it's not going to translate into me like dragging my feet with training or taking anything less serious because that's really not that's really not like what I think or believe at all.
Yeah, there's a very fine line between celebrating your accomplishments and letting it motivate you without getting cocky about who you are,
Yeah.
what you've accomplished. And I don't think anyone. I mean, I've talked to you for what, like 10 minutes now. You don't strike me as the kind of guy that's going to let it get to your head. Um, but man, since you have accomplished this stuff and you've been able, it's just sort of like this upward trajectory of you getting better and better year after year. And again, you only started playing offensive line in college.
Yes, sir.
How have you been able to continue to elevate your game? And ultimately, what do you do that makes you such a good offensive lineman? Like, what is the most important skill set or maybe even technique that you've been able to really, maybe to an extent, master? Not that you can't get better at it, but like, what sort of, how have you always been able to get better? And ultimately, what can you point to being like, this is the most important piece of being a great offensive lineman?
I guess if you were to single it down to a single thing that's more important than anything else, in my opinion, and maybe someone else would have a different opinion, but I think it's more so about playing aggressive and tough and mean. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, that doesn't mean much if you come rolling in at like 160 pounds. So, like, there's definitely an aspect of like the weight room's like, incredibly important. And for the longest time, that's what I trained, I think, harder than anything, like getting bigger, getting stronger, like keeping my quickness and not like losing it while gaining weight. That was of the utmost importance. And then in about the last year or so, I took a lot greater like I placed a much higher level of importance on actual position. Like in the past, in the off season, like I would work on the technique. I'd work on past sets. Like now, I'm not trying to say this in like any like overall broad statement kind of way, but for the most part, I feel like run blocking is all like mentality. There's technique. There's like your step, your footwork has to be correct. And you have to know the scheme. But like in my opinion, like with that stuff can be learned, but you either have it or you don't. You know what I mean? Like it's about heart and like fighting. Pass blocking, on the other hand, is like I came at that with fight and heart like my first couple years, and I was leaning every single play. So I'd get, someone rush by me in less than a second. So that's a lot more about technique. Um, but I placed a lot higher importance on like learning about like the techniques, and I would like actually go to football gyms like specific to offensive linemen. There's this place down in Georgia, Velocity. I went there a lot with my teammates, and we would just go there and then work on like offensive line drills. You know what I mean? Like we would work out as well and lift, but we went down there for a whole week, our entire offensive line. Like, we rented an Airbnb and like put all of our money in, and like every single day we'd go over there and train. Um, and so I think that it's like you have to you have to look at the whole thing. But if there's one thing that's more important than anything else that I feel like would set you apart, is like the mentality and the heart, while you're playing.
Love it.
That's my.
So as we get close to wrapping it up here, who do you watch film on? I know you watch a lot of yourself, I'm sure, but were there any pros that you looked at to try to model your game in any way after?
I feel like it's kind of a cliche answer at this point, but Quentin Nelson is like, I don't even know if I should look at him because he's a different body type than me. Like he's much heavier. I should find someone who's like my size and my weight, but like he does what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like he mauls people, he gets after it. But I guess for the most part, I guess I kind of stopped watching specifically guard. When I found out, okay, well they may want to play me at center, like Jason Kelsey, the center for the Eagles. Like I don't think. I guess it's kind of hard because I try to find guys who are specific to my body size, because not saying that I'm not confident in my abilities or my strength, but like a guy who's 300 pounds or like 305, like compared to a guard who's 340 or 335, like we're going to be probably rolling, like we're going to be running different, doing different things.
Yeah, sure.
But I guess it's not really like there's one guy that I model my game after, like I enjoy watching football and watching line of scrimmage and seeing people get after it. But I guess I've just kind of like always thought, like I've never tried to idolize anybody in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that you'll see soon that that will suit you well, because ultimately, when those are your teammates or you're competing against them, you certainly don't want them on a pedestal, because that's an even playing field.
You're right. That's true.
Uh, well, Coleman, thank you for hanging out. I got a couple quick questions that I want to get you out on. It's called the gauntlet. So, real quick, what's most important, having the number one offense or the number one defense?
I feel like this is kind of a tough question to answer with a single, word, but I'd have to say offense if we're just keeping it at one word.
All right. It's not an easy one. Now, what's most important? Is it the players or is it the scheme?
The players.
Fair enough.
Without
Now,
a good scheme, but anyways.
yeah, it's another that there's no right answer there.
Yeah.
Pre-game ritual, was there anything that you had to do before each game?
In high school, I kind of did like I had like this list of songs that I would do, and I'd listen in the same order. But as I got older, I kind of just like I don't know, like I don't really look at it as like it's not luck, like the pregame ritual happens like the months and the weeks beforehand. So there's nothing
Definitely.
specific I do. Maybe like throw on some Skinner or something.
There you go. Now, do you have a favorite football memory to date?
I have one that sticks out as much as any other. Um, and it's not really in college, which is a shame. I wish it was, and it wasn't in high school either. It was in Pee Wee ball, and I don't even know how old I was. I wasn't very old, but we were it was in the playoffs. It was like I think it was the second round of the playoffs, and we played 13 games. So it was the game before the championship, and we were getting whooped. It was like 20, what was it, like 24-8. And when you're little, like that's like getting destroyed, you know what I mean? Because you can hardly pass the ball at all or do anything like that. And once again, not trying to blow my horn, but if anyone has any questions, and my dad can back the story up, because he was like in the huddle, calling the plays, how you do when you're little, and we were getting destroyed, and we had like some kids like kind of like throwing the towel in and like, well, this is like we're already beat. And I was like, came in, I was like, the game's not over until it's over, boys. And I was honestly just mimicking what my dad had told me. You know what I mean? Like we'd be watching football, and like, whoever's like losing, and it just kind of came up in conversation. Like, he told us, like my brother and I, like the game's never over until it's over. And I said that, and I don't think that rallied everybody, or that everybody like got all like starry eyed and like started playing better. But we ended up coming back, tying the game, and then beat them in overtime, and then went on to win the championship. So
That's
that
very
one sticks.
cool. And you know what? You are far from the only guy whose favorite memory is a Pee Wee football memory. It
Yeah,
happens. It happens very frequently. Yeah. So don't feel ashamed. Tell that
that's
story
awesome.
with pride every time.
I
Uh,
will.
all right, last one, and I think this is the most important. You're gonna do so much more. But if you were talking right now to a kid that was like 16, 17, that just says, "Hey, man, how do I get there? How do I get to where you are about to go pro?" What's the best piece of advice that you'd give?
You know, I don't think this is original advice, because I remember hearing someone say this to me, and I can't remember who it was. I wish I could say it so I could give credit to whoever it was. But I was listening to somebody, and they were telling me, and I think it was like a group of people, it was in college, it was in the past couple of years. And they were saying like, like the secret to success, like it's not a secret. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing you need to like dig into the library books to find out like what can I do to get better? Like it's all out there. It's just a matter of doing it. Like are you gonna like go to bed at the right time so you can sleep enough hours? Like are you gonna make sure that you get up and eat breakfast, like and eat the right foods so you're like gaining the right weight? Are you gonna go into the weight room and like put everything you can into it so you can get stronger, and then do the same at practice, and then like every single day when you're tired and exhausted, like are you gonna keep going or are you gonna quit? Like I think that was a really like powerful thing that stuck in my head. And I did it, but like hearing it when I was younger would have like made that clearer to me, because there was times where I thought to myself, like, what am I not doing? And I think that like if there's something that you are passionate about or that you love, like there's no amount of like looking into, okay, what can I do? And then it's just a matter of doing it. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Cole, thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much for taking the time, man. I appreciate this conversation so much. I
Thank you.
believe you are on Twitter at Cole Strange 2. Is that right? And is there any place else people should follow you?
I think that's right. And that's pretty much all I have. I have an Instagram. For the most part, that's kind of just like for my girlfriend, like she wanted me to get one, but I have an Instagram out there somewhere. It's like Cole60798. It's a bunch of random numbers. So we can follow me there, but that's about it.
Well, I think that's going to blow up pretty soon.
Yes, sir.
Man, well, thanks again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.